I know, fancy. Hello, hello. Happy Wednesday. Thank you so much for joining Independent Live today. My name is Evie King. I'm the president of Independent, and I am joined by one of our team members and a friend of mine, Heather Campbell. Heather, do you want to introduce yourself? Because I don't think you have been live on Independent that much.
I don't think that I've been live on Independent, at least not in a while. Although the last couple years kind of blur together with moving so much. So like, it's very possible that,
You
that's
have
happened.
moved a lot.
I'm
I would say above average.
totally what we are hoping is above average and not the norm for the remainder of our time serving. I'm Heather Campbell. I'm a military spouse, mom of 3, and a registered dietitian. And I'm part of the Independent team who gets to work on my favorite project every time that I work with Independent. So I'm really happy to be here. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And for those of you who are joining us live, let us know in the comments where you're joining from. Let us know if you have taken the Fuel to Homefront course already, if you're interested in learning more. And yeah, that's kind of what we're here to talk about today. If I remember correctly, Heather, we have been working on this course for a while, over 3 years at this point, because we talked about it when I still lived in Kansas, and I have since PCS'd twice, and same with you. But that was because originally when we talked about it as a workshop, which we did. And we actually launched that soon after our conversation. So talk to me a little bit about at the time it wasn't even called Fuel to Homefront. At the time, you just had this idea, and honestly, I don't even remember how we started talking about it. Was it just because we had a different phone conversation? And then you were like, I have this dream, and there's my idea. And I was like, I love that idea.
I don't remember all the specifics. I know that early on in my husband's career, I had an opportunity to volunteer and teach cooking and nutrition on a budget classes at our local base. And then we moved to a new location, and that wasn't what I was doing. I was doing other things in the community and not necessarily on our installation. We lived, off base at the time. And when COVID shut everything down in 2020, and I first joined in with Independent, I saw, okay, we have these things, but then we're starting to hear more stories of what's going on in different parts of our community, right? That's part of the beauty and maybe some of the difficulty of the pandemic was everything went virtual. And so my network just exploded. And some of the things I had been working on locally or just in my, direct circles of influence seemed like they were bigger problems. And so as I joined efforts with different projects and learned about different things, I co-authored a journal article during the height of the pandemic about the difficulty of feeding your family and getting them back to the table. That was in a peer-reviewed journal. And in my research with that and research with a few other projects, I remember you and I having a conversation. I think we were planning for the wellness summit and like, well, what could we do? And I was like, well, what if we had a short session about something like this? Or, we don't really have anybody teaching on this topic. We don't have access to that in the Department of Defense. We don't have access to dietitians or, when you meet with a financial planner at your installation, they're not going to talk about the specifics of how you implement those ideas. But hey, here's this really small piece of the pie that I know a lot about that I can help with. What if we did something like that, right? And then we found out we were moving back to Alaska, and I remember asking, hey, can we launch this in-person workshop? Can we launch it in Alaska? It's really important to me. That's the season where we experienced food insecurity, where I first started serving and teaching in this area. I would love to gift this to that community as we go back. And so that's kind of how it went. And then, it's just continued to grow from there. And it's really interesting to see how we've changed and how we've grown and brought more people in the team. But yeah, it was that early conversation of, well, what if this? And then we kind of ran with it.
So I do remember that at the time, food insecurity in the military wasn't really being talked about. And you and I discussed especially how in Alaska, you were noticing it a lot. You had experienced it. Why is this something that is so personal to you because it is very personal, and you've sort of dedicated your sort of profession now towards addressing it and really talking about it in a way that makes people realize, one, it is a very complicated issue, but two, that there are ways that we can improve and help military families not be food insecure. Because when you look at the statistics, they are at a much higher level than the civilian population.
Yeah, I think when we first started talking about this, I remember that the data from MFAN, the Military Family Advisory Network, they are fantastic at research. Every time they release something new, I'm like chomping at the bit to get my hands on their data, because they just give such robust information. Their numbers were 1 in 6 military families. And I remember, as a dietitian who has a background in pediatric and family nutrition, thinking like, wait a second, I know I experienced this. I didn't know it was happening this much in my community. And then shortly after, we got the 2021 numbers, which were taken during the height of the pandemic, and it was 1 in 5. And then the DoD said, okay, we're going to look at it officially. We'll do an internal review and we'll get back to you with numbers, right? And that data was a little bit delayed, but that came out in July, excuse me, of 2022, that yes, food insecurity is happening, and it's as high as 1 in 4. And those are our worldwide numbers, but there are definitely pockets of more difficult military installations. And if you talk to anybody who's served in the military or been part of a military family, they can probably tell you about an installation they were stationed at that was more difficult than others. And so there's a lot of variation in there with that. And it is really complex. And so as you get into, I think Corey Weathers does a wonderful job in her book, Military Culture Shift, of explaining the complex environment of the military community, appropriations, ways and means, how things get passed through Congress and in bills. And so while we wait for some of those complex things to work themselves out, we have an opportunity as a nonprofit and as military spouses living in the community to say, well, hey, we're here now, and this is what you military families can do with the resources that are available now. While we wait for some of these complex solutions, here's what you can do right now that could benefit your family. And I think that's one of the really neat things about what we did with Fuel the Homefront, was say, yes, this is complex. Yes, we're acknowledging that. Also, here's what you can do for your family right now to feel more confident and feel more prepared in the way that you provide for your family. So it's been really fun, but yeah, it wasn't always a popular topic. I'm not always a super popular dinner guest to bring in, who might talk about these really difficult conversations, but it's important work, and this is my community. I'm highly vested in the success of our military and their families and our national security. So it's an honor to serve them and give my talents how I can.
Yeah, definitely. So we pushed this course out as a workshop in Alaska to begin. So that was sort of our testing ground, and it was going really well. And then we worked with MFAN, like you mentioned. They were doing some food bank or mobile food banks, if I remember correctly. And then we worked with them to create a workshop, a virtual workshop at each of the different locations where those food banks were. And then finally, I was like, Heather, you are one person. It is great. I love scheduling these. And I was like, we need to make this an on-demand course, because our whole mission is around making wellness accessible. And live courses, while great, because, watching them, wonderful dialogue between those who are attending and you, and able to provide like basically on-demand feedback to any of their questions. But also, we were getting 20, 30 people in those. And when we launched this course, within 2 weeks, we already had 200 people registered, which is huge.
Yeah.
But it took a while. It took a while because, well, one, we have never created a course before. So for Independent, this is our first course ever. And so everyone on the team, we are a wonderful team of right now all military spouses, military and veteran spouses. And so we were all sort of learning. And the recording of the videos, there were some things there, and yeah, it was fun. So how is that for you, going from a workshop to us then creating an on-demand course, because this is a first for you as well?
It was, and we brought in another dietitian, Franco, who's wonderful and adds so much knowledge to the team and even into our content and into the workshop. And there's always this fear of like, okay, this is my baby that I've grown, and that people didn't even want to talk about it or touch it, and now like we're going to just make it available and we're bringing in other people, and there's this fear, right, that it would turn into something that we didn't initially intend on it being, or that it would completely morph in how we wanted it to be initially. So there's a lot of give and take there, and I think that the independent team, both internally and as we work with organizations outside of independent, we're so collaborative and so respectful. And so it was really a joy to work with the team, knowing that we truly all have the best interests of our future students at heart. And I think the flexibility and grace in the recording, I think there was a point where the first initial modules I was recording, like first I recorded, I think on the wrong platform, and then I recorded in the proper platform, but I had like an outdated version, and like I think that I recorded some of them like 3 times, like in my base house, like barricading my kids out the door with my camera and my ring light. So it definitely was a learning curve to make sure that we had the right product, that we're giving accurate information, and also presenting it in a professional way that can really serve the families who have access to it. So it's definitely been a learning experience, but not one that I've had to go through alone. So working with the team is way better than trying to push a boulder uphill by myself.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and to be honest, it's a lot of fun. So my day-to-day is wildly different depending on what I do as independent, but I got to tap into a little bit of my creative side with this, which I don't get to do as often now that I'm president of the organization. I sort of have my hands a little bit of everything, but the team just sort of takes the lead. But I loved the concept for this, and we had a graphic designer who offered to do our branding pro bono. And my idea for him, I was like, I really like the idea of Victory Garden. So that sort of feel. And then so he put together this awesome brand for us, which you can see in the, I don't know, top right, top left. For me, it's top right.
It's on my top right. So
yes. And then that's all he did. He gave us colors, he gave us logos, he gave us fonts, and then I created all of the collateral, so all the workbooks and everything. And that was fun for me because at the time we didn't have anyone on the team who did that. Thank you, Canva. And yeah, it was a lot of fun to put the workbook together, to design the meal plan pager that we did, and some resources. Got to listen to the course and learn some things myself, re-listen to the course and learn some things myself as well. And it was a lot of fun for me because, again, I don't always get to do that now. So being able to put the workbook together and then help the team with the platform is Thinkific, which we're sort of exploring and wanting to use because it's easy. So yes, it was definitely a little bit of a learning curve for all of us. But as you said, you are, I should probably change the banner. See, I'm just getting too excited about chatting. You are a registered dietitian, and so is Franco. And I think that that's really important to talk about why this course is, I don't want to say different, but why it's important that it is a course made by registered dietitians, because I always say experience does not equal expertise. And as you have said many times and educated people on, there are very few instances where military families can get registered dietitian help that is covered by insurance. So registered dietitians are inaccessible to many military families. So why is it important that that is part of the content of this course for those who don't get access to a registered dietitian?
I think that understanding the depth of knowledge that's required to become a dietitian really gives that perspective of why they're the gold standard of nutrition experts, why they are the ones you can trust with those things. To be a dietitian, you get your undergrad degree, then you do a year of supervised practice before you can sit for your exam, which is the equivalent of medical boards, right? So very similar to social work. I need to get my undergrad, my supervised clinical hours, and then a master's degree and sit for this exam. So at minimum, to even get those, that fancy alphabet behind your name is 6 years of schooling. And it's everything from biochemistry, post-biochemistry metabolism class. You've got cooking classes, you have public education classes. There's just a lot that, I would go from a class on public policy to a biochemistry exam to a cooking lab to my anatomy and physiology lab, right? Like there's just all of this education, because how your body functions and how you function within your community and just the economics of food is so wide that becoming a dietitian requires a little bit of knowledge on everything. So you have to understand how public health works and medical diagnoses and metabolism and the economics of food and agriculture. And so when you're talking to a dietitian or getting input from a dietitian, you're not just getting someone who took a 6-week wellness course or a couple months of a wellness course specifically on nutrition, but you're really getting insight from somebody who has all of those different points of view and are able to bring it into the conversation. So it's important to me, as we continue to give information out to military families, that we are giving them that gold standard, that we're giving them the best that we possibly can. Some of the organizations that we interact with as military spouses and military family members don't view us as much of a valuable member in maybe their patient load or their client load as a spouse or as a family member. So I think that's one thing that's really unique about Independent is we stand in that gap and we say, this is important and we want to make this accessible. And also you're not getting, a second-rate product from us. We're going to make the very best available because it's not available in a lot of other places that you go. And military families, at this point, American families don't always have the funds to hire a private dietitian or to hire someone. So creating a product that is from experts, that's vetted by us, that is all research-based information that we're sharing was really, really important in the process.
Yeah, absolutely. So very briefly, I think we should talk about a little bit of what the course sort of covers, because it really does cover things, I think, in a very easy, bite-sized manner. That was something that I wanted to make sure we did, because asking a military spouse to sit down for an hour-long course in one go is probably not going to happen. So again, thinking, how do we make this accessible? So we started out, I think some of the modules are as short as 5 minutes. I think the longest maybe is 10. Maybe. That's just because it didn't make sense to cut it anywhere in the middle of that. It would have been just very awkward. So first we start with, I think, something that so many military families don't even know where to begin, which is what even a food budget should look like for a certain family. And there are resources for that. So we don't have right now a certified financial planner course portion of this. And I say right now, that's very important because that is hopefully something we're working on. But you do talk about, this is a standard dollar amount that you can then determine fits your family. So first, I think that that's really important because so many people don't even know where to begin. What should my food budget even look like? Right. But then we talk about shopping and you talk about different foods. And I don't know, it's just, to me, it's it made going to the grocery store so much more empowering because I felt like I was shopping from a place of knowledge rather than guessing whether or not the decisions that I am making for my family are both budget minded, but also nutrition minded, which is extremely important.
Yeah. It's, it can be tricky, especially when you get into wellness and health. There's a lot of race privilege, a lot of wealth privilege. Thin white folks with lots of money can do all these things, right? Well, if you can't do these things, then you must not be as healthy or you must be inferior, right? So I think we did a really great job of saying, no, like, let's get down to brass tacks. This is what it actually looks like to eat well. It doesn't have to be really fancy product or really unfamiliar foods, but here's how you can do it if you're using WIC, if you're using SNAP, if you're using a food bank, if you're relying on frozen and canned vegetables to meet your produce needs from a budget standpoint. Like, when we were creating this course, I lived in Alaska where everything's, a watermelon's like $22. So like we're keeping that in mind as we were creating the content and really giving those actionable steps, but in a way that didn't feel overwhelming, which I think everyone on the team was really intentional about. We're not just going to flood with information, but we want to give pieces of information that somebody who's never approached this topic before could go to their commissary, could go to their grocery store and feel more equipped for making those decisions, because ultimately you want to have confidence in the way that you're providing for your family. I don't want to just give you information or just tell you stuff that makes you feel poorly about how you've previously made decisions. It's more of, I think we do a great job in the curriculum of meeting people where they are and saying, what works for your family? Okay, let's maximize that. Is this what your tempo looks like? Is it eating at the ball field? Is it Tuesday nights or drive-through night? Like, how can we use those regular tempos of your life and those regular budget constraints and make them work to the advantage of your family, which I think was really, really important as we put this together to give quality information also that is actually achievable by, the masses.
Yeah. I don't see any questions so far, but if anyone has any questions, please let us know before and or after. But I think something else that you made sure to discuss throughout the whole thing was not only, yes, we want to be budget minded, we want to make sure that we're talking about the nutrition piece, but we're also wanting to reduce mealtime stress, because to me, one of the biggest barriers to eating well is the idea that it is expensive, it is time consuming, and which is not untrue if done, without some education behind it, because obviously food waste is crazy in this country. I certainly throw food away more than I probably want to because I don't plan well. And something that I remember you said was like, really have some meals that are really easy that you can just pull out. And you gave people sort of permission sometimes to just like, sometimes you just need to eat. And that's okay. That's not going to like derail your whole life. And I feel like you kept saying that. It was all these like little things of encouragement. Like, by the way, if sometimes your kids are just eating chicken nuggets and they're not touching that vegetable, they're eating. And to me, that was like, oh, well, that's okay. If,
I made a social media reel a couple years ago that was talking about frozen chicken nuggets. And it was like, as a dietitian and a mom of 3, someone asked me if I feed my kids frozen chicken nuggets. No, I cook them first. Like,
yes,
my kids do eat frozen chicken nuggets, and when you think about it, I remember when I taught the very, very first time. So, really green, really nervous, teaching Fuel the Homefront in person at a workshop. And someone came up to me after. She was a military spouse and also a veteran, and she had used her GI Bill to go back to art school, not realizing that it wasn't really going to cover all of the things she needed it to cover. And she ended up living in her car, and she was homeless. She was food insecure, and now has a lot of anxiety about providing for her family, storing up food, but also as a single income family at the time living in Alaska. And she came up to me after and said, thank you for saying that cereal is a complete meal. And one of the things, that I addressed in the course was, hey, if you're going to feed cereal, cool. Make sure it's got this much fiber, this much protein, and do a high protein milk, either a soy milk or a Ripple or a cow's milk or a goat milk, and call it good. And that is an adequate meal that's going to give you grain, that's going to give you protein, that, throw some fresh fruit on top if you want to. But I think as military spouses who often are in seasons of solo parenting, we need permission to realize, yep, we're going to drive through, or yep, we're going to feed cereal, but then not to have that guilt on the back end of like, well, I'm not doing good enough because I fed them cereal. Like, nope, dietitian hat on, telling you it is okay if you feed your kids cereal for dinner and call it good. And you know what? There's times that I feed my kids cereal for multiple evenings for dinner, because that's just the reality of life. But if you build that into your regular thinking that, like, yeah, sometimes these seasons will happen, but here's what my regular baseline is. Or, oh, I didn't thaw out the meat, or I didn't realize this was a crock pot recipe. I thought it was an Instant Pot recipe. I need a backup plan because the kids are hangry and we need to feed them in 20 minutes. What's one of my backups that I've got in the pantry that's ready to go, right? So that's saving those dollars from that going out, and it gives me that confidence to know that, okay, I'm still feeding my family and taking care of my budget the way that I want to, that can still give me confidence. And that's what we really wanted to bring to all of the parents. You know, I use the parents term very loosely, really the adult caregivers in the home, whoever that looks like. Give them the permission to do what works best for their family, and realize that you, as the adult in your household, you're the expert on what works best for you. I can give ideas, I can give thought starters, but ultimately each of us is the expert on what works best for us. So this is designed to be a tool and a resource to help you make the best decisions, respecting the fact that you're the expert in your home.
Yeah. I think the other thing that is wonderful is Thinkific allows people to ask questions, and we take those questions again back to the team. So your questions are getting answered by, the registered dietitians on our team, or others, depending on what it is. But they're again, getting vetted by wellness professionals, which again is not something that so many military families have access to or can get reimbursed. So that's pretty unique. We do also have a module in there where we talk about eating well when you go out, things to keep in mind, both from a budget perspective, a nutrition perspective, and a stress perspective, because as military families, for various reasons, just like any family, you might find yourself needing to eat out, and that doesn't need to derail your budget or your dietary needs and what you're trying to accomplish for your family. So again, everything that we do throughout this whole course, we are keeping in mind, one, how do we make it accessible and relevant to military families? So it is designed for this lifestyle, but it's also designed in a way that you can then take it once you are no longer, quote, a military family, now you're a veteran family. You can still use everything. So it is open to military and veteran family spouses. We, as independent, believe often that it is the spouse who makes most of the food decisions in the home. That's why we market it. But honestly, anyone can take the course. It is completely free. Again, we wanted to make it accessible, and to us, cost should not be a reason that you can't learn how to feed your family and gain that confidence that Heather was talking about. We're always open to feedback, so you can send us a message. Hey, I would love to see a little bit more of this. That's totally fine. It is, as we say, a living course. We already have some future modules that we're going to be adding to it. This is made possible through a donation by NewRes. Believe me, though, we would have pushed it out even if we didn't have one. That's how much we believed in the need for this within the military spouse community. And Heather and the team, we're all on board. So it's Heather, myself, one of our board members, Melanie, who sort of manages the whole thing. Elizabeth is another team member. And then Franco, who is our other registered dietitian on the team. And yeah, this is just the first of many, many courses. So Heather, we have 2 more minutes. What is something else that you want to add before we close out? Just whether it's about the course, the creating of the course, since then, whatever. I'll let you close out.
I think that I see in the comments or in the questions from Facebook, would you ever consider a live class again for a specific branch, like streaming in at a conference? Absolutely. That is our bread and butter. That's what we love to do with this course, is be there in person, especially or virtually. But sometimes things are unique to one location. So what's available, say at in Washington State versus Texas versus Hampton Roads, Virginia, is going to be very different. So there's a lot of advantages to doing a specific one. And that still is available to have one of us come in and facilitate the class and say, okay, let's talk a little bit more in depth. Here's all the same content from the course, but let's talk about it with a question and answer situation and really get some more of those questions addressed. So that is still, yes, an answer to your question, Rebecca. That is still something that is available that we can do. I'm really excited for what the future is with Fuel the Homefront. I'm excited for some of the feedback we've gotten, because I think There's really great things, even from a feeding your family perspective. Other colleagues of mine who have taken the course and given me ideas that we can go forward with in the future. It's really cool. So I'm excited that this is just the starting point for what we can offer.
Yeah, it's just the start. I will add one other thing is, yes, it is a living course. If you register for it, you will have access to the content and any of the updates into perpetuity. So again, you're not going to, only sign up once and then that's it. And anything after that, no, we really want to make sure that you are kept up to date with the latest and greatest. Some of the other things that we're probably going to be doing is working with food banks to provide it as a supplemental. They provide an immediate need, and then we help educate kind of going forward, because at the end of the day, we're all going to be grocery shopping. It's just, one of the things that will probably never go away. I happen to like it, but I know not everyone does, but it's just something that we can all learn how to do differently or better, or new tips, whatever it happens to be. But again, at the end of the day, we want to help military families eat well, stick to a budget, and reduce mealtime stress. So, Heather, thank you so much for coming to us at the beginning with this idea, and then joining us as we created the first ever course that Independent has ever put out. And I know that working alongside you and the work that you're doing, both in the nutrition space, food insecurity space, that we're just going to continue to make it better for military families wherever they are located. And we welcome anybody who's listening today to take the course. Let us know your thoughts. If you want us to do a workshop, happy to do that. Just send us a message and we can discuss what that looks like. Like Heather says, making it more personal to the location that you're in, or the unit that you're in, or even the season of life, like if there's a deployment or something like that. We're happy to work with you on that, because again, we just want to make sure that military spouses have the resources they need to make their families, healthy, happy, and thriving. So
Absolutely.
thank you for joining us, and thank you everyone for joining. Bye.
Bye.